Bueno, pues por fin Vinylroute da un salto internacional y tenemos hoy con nosotros a Lou Marini, o Blue Marini. ¿Por qué lo de Blue Marini? Pues porque es uno de los míticos Blues Brothers. ¿Qué pasa? Pues que él está en España ahora y nos contará por qué está en España. Pero nuestro inglés con nuestra querida profesora Clementine, bueno, la mía pues no dio para mucho. Entonces nos hemos traído a un amigo de la casa, a Jorge Lera, alias 𝗂𝗶𝗁𝗿𝗺, que va a hacer las veces de entrevistador como periodista que es, y además periodista experto en muchos temas. Y le voy a pasar el micrófono para que empiece a disparar preguntas a Blue Marini.
Hello, Lou. Thank you very much for being here with
Buenos
us.
días.
And many people would ask, what are you doing here in Spain? You have a close link to Spain, but can you explain us about this relationship?
In 1991, after a concert in Madrid, I think it was our first concert in Madrid with the Blues Brothers Band, I met a beautiful young Spanish woman, and my life changed. And we were married in 2000, and so we have a casa aquí in Madrid. And then over the years, I've met a lot of musicians here and started playing with Red House with Francisco Simón and 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗶𝗰𝗿. And so each time that I come to Spain, normally we try to have a concert or two somewhere here in Madrid, or we've played all over Spain actually with Red House. And in the past few years, I've been playing with Ramón Arroyo and 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗶𝗰𝗿, just the three of us. We call ourselves the Tres Amigos, and two guitars and me, and we all sing. So besides, of course, coming to see the family and all our friends here, I also play usually when I'm here.
Okay, that was beautiful. We were there. We've been watching you play a couple of times. I was actually, I think, in one of the first concerts of the Blues Brothers in Madrid, in Sala Canciller, I think it was, with Eddie Floyd, singing.
With Eddie Floyd.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I was there.
Fantastic. But the first time I was in Madrid was with Blood, Sweat and Tears in 1972. And I met a young man who was hitchhiking around Spain. And I think I bought him lunch and invited him to the concert. That was in 72. In about 1998 in Tokyo, this gentleman came up to me and said that he was that young man, and he had the poster of the concert that he had taken from, what theater is it, Meme? Monumental. From Monumental, and he had it framed, and he had carried it with him all those years. He was now a commercial attaché for the United States government, and he had it from 1972 to 1998, and he presented it to me in Tokyo Blue Note. Bonito.
Can you tell us about, because you were born in South Carolina, can you, second generation Italian, if I'm not wrong? Tell us about your upbringing and your first musical influences.
Well, I was lucky because my father is a terrific musician, was a terrific musician. And he, at the time when I was born in Charleston, South Carolina. My dad was in the Navy band in Charleston, and he was arranging music for it and playing saxophone in the band. And my mom was from North Carolina, and she was, her three older brothers were all in the United States Navy in World War II, and all saw service in combat, actually, in the Pacific. And she went to Charleston to work as a waitress in the officers' club where the band used to play. So that's how they met. He was a musician. And then I grew up in Ohio, in a small town, which was sort of ideal, I think, because it was maybe the last generation of innocent or semi-innocent children, you know, without internet, without all these. So I started playing when I was 10. My father bought me a clarinet, and when he saw that I was interested and was going to continue, he did a wise thing. He had me study with one of his best friends, who was a wonderful jazz saxophone player also. His name was 𝗬𝘀𝗶𝗰. And he was a charming and lovely man. And so from the time I was maybe 13 or 14, I was studying. Once a week, my dad would drive me after school to a neighboring town. I would take a lesson with Frank. And I played in my father's high school band. And in those years, I think when I was 15, 𝗬𝘄𝗁𝗏, the famous band leader, started a summertime clinic for with a faculty of jazz musicians for young students to come and study, you know. And it was a week-long, very immersive camp. And my roommate was David Sanborn. So David and I have known each other since we were 15. 𝗬𝘀𝗁𝗏 was at the camp. Don Grolnick, the great pianist that played with James Taylor for so many years, was there. He and I were friends. That's when we first became friends. Mike Lawrence, a great trumpet player. Randy Brecker was there. Peter Erskine was 7 years old, a precocious young drummer. So in that camp, it was sort of a seminal thing. So many players that I ended up playing with professionally later on in my life, I first met at that camp. And then later, I was lucky enough to be on the faculty of that camp. And so I taught at this, what then became the National Stage Band camps. At that first National Stage Band camp, I heard the band, big band, from the University of North Texas. They had just won, I think, the Illinois Jazz Festival. And I thought they sounded great. So when I graduated from high school, I had the opportunity to go to Berkeley in Boston or down to North Texas. And I chose North Texas because I had heard that band. And also there was something about the allure of going far away. And the funny thing too, another one of those coincidences that happened in your life, at the same clinic, the same 𝗬𝘄𝗁𝗏 Jazz Clinic, I heard a wonderful trumpet player named 𝗬𝘄𝗁𝗏 give a clinic. And, you know, an hour where he talks about trumpet playing and talks about music. And I thought and still think it was the best clinic I heard in my life. He was a wonderful musician. And I didn't meet him then, but when I was 19 in North Texas, I think I was still 18, my freshman year, he was playing in Dallas, and his saxophone player was in a car accident. He was in the #1 band at North Texas, and I was, as a freshman, I was in the #2 band. And so they called me to sub for him, and then I ended up playing with 𝗬𝘄𝗁𝗏. And the trombone player was a guy named Bobby Butter Burgess, and he had been the first trombone with Maynard Ferguson's band, with Woody Herman's band, and with 𝗬𝘄𝗁𝗏's band. So for the next 2 or 3 years, in addition to playing in the 1 o'clock band in North Texas, which is a fabled band, and I was working 6 nights a week in Dallas as a student. And then I also got into the recording business because in Dallas at that time, there was a very lucrative and strong recording scene. And in that scene, there was a cadre of world-class musicians. So my apprenticeship in those years between 1963 or 64, when I went to North Texas, and 1970, were fundamental. So then when I decided to move to New York, I was very prepared.
And what was your musical taste for when you were growing up? What was the music that you liked to listen? The music that you really enjoy? Was it jazz?
Well, of course, as a kid, I was listening to Rockin' Robin and Elvis Presley and all that stuff, but the music of that time in the 50s. But that was the era of the big TV specials. So Andy Williams had a show. You would see Frank Sinatra specials. You would see Dean Martin specials. You'd see Peggy Lee. You would see, and my dad, being a fan of the big bands and a wonderful arranger for big bands also, he was always playing big band music around the house. And then when I also at that time discovered Miles Davis. I remember the first album that I got was Quiet Nights, and I was amazed. And then there was a wonderful album that Michel Legrand did, a jazz album. And there were maybe 4 different bands on the album. So that was the first time I heard Ben Webster, Thad Jones, and different players in that group. And that led me to hear a wonderful live concert at Town Hall of Thelonious Monk's music. And that was arranged by a guy named Hall Overton. All of those things were very impactful on me. And in that time too, I was playing along with records, because one clever thing that my father did when he started me off playing, is he started me off playing the classical pedagogy of the clarinet, scales and arpeggios. But at the same time, he encouraged me to play along with records and learn to play by ear. So there were whole albums. I remember one album of 4 alto saxophone players from Los Angeles: Benny Carter, Herb Geller, Charlie Mariano, and Art Pepper. And I learned that record by heart. I could play every solo along with the record. And later on, talking to guys like Randy Brecker and Mike Brecker, they did the same thing. Because when our heroes were playing, they were playing 6 nights a week all over the United States. But by the time that we were in the 60s, the possibility of going and sitting in with a band of professionals like that was already gone. That scene had started to disappear. So that's the way I learned to play. And I came late my dad I remember going to hear Count Basie's band when I was about 14 years old. And we were standing as close as I am to you guys in front of the bandstand. And I remember they played one of those slow ba 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 da ba, and when they got to the end, each 4-bar phrase was más, menos, and then suddenly whop ba, and it was those commercials where the guy is with his palos blowing. That's what it felt like. It was thrilling. So I basically, from the time I was 13 or 14, I never thought of doing anything except playing.
Yo soy mucho más frívolo que Jorge Lera, pero no lo puedo remediar, soy muy mitómano y quería preguntarte, aunque los Blues Brothers no sean solo Dan Aykroyd y James Belushi, pero sobre todo James Belushi para mí es un icono del cine, es un personaje. Entonces quería saber cómo era la relación de toda la banda, en concreto la tuya, con James Belushi y Dan Aykroyd.
So the relationship with John Belushi is a big pop icon. But how was it the relationship day by day with the band?
At the time I was playing on the Saturday Night Live show. I was the original saxophone player on Saturday Night Live. And so we knew Belushi, and by the time the Blues Brothers movie happened, which was 1978, we had already been together for 4 years. on the show every week, you know, and then with the rehearsals. And so we knew Danny and John very well. And they were, I think Belushi got interested in the blues through a guy named Doc Palmas, who was sort of a blues historian in New York. And so they got this idea, it was probably Aykroyd, because the two of them were like this. They loved each other. They were very close. And very different though, you know. Belushi was very volatile, very emotional, super insightful, super simpatico. And Aykroyd has just got a mind like a razor sharp, very wide range of interest. I think that he wrote actually for a thesis in college, in university, Aykroyd wrote a treatise on prisons in Canada that they used parts of, apparently. But anyway, they're very different. But they got this idea for these characters, these two guys in the black suits and the hats and the sunglasses, based on the old black blues men. And they presented it to the director of Saturday Night Live, Lorne Michaels, and he wasn't interested. He didn't think it was funny. But they persuaded him to do one song. And we rehearsed it and we played it, and Lorne said no. And so they tried again the following week with another song. And again, Lorne said no. And then that week, the show, they cut one of the comedy skits. And so the show was un poco corto. And he said, okay, go ahead, do your stupid song. And we did the song, and the next day, or Monday morning, NBC was flooded with phone calls. People, the Blues Brothers, they loved it, you know. And so then we did one more song, and then that was
Which
the end.
song it was, the first one?
I think we rehearsed Rocket 88, but I'm not sure if Rocket 88 was the first one we played, or, oh man, I don't remember. And I don't remember which one we played second either. I'm sorry, I can't remember. But at any rate, that was the end of the season. So that was like May. And then sometime in June, I got a phone call from I can't remember if it was Belushi or, I think it was Belushi. He called me up and said that they were going to put a band together, and we were going to go to Los Angeles and be opening act for Steve Martin, 10 nights at the Universal Amphitheater in Los Angeles. So, you know, we just thought it was going to be some nice pasta and 10 days in LA and 3 days of rehearsal, or 5 days of rehearsal beforehand. So 2 weeks in Los Angeles and the sunshine, you know. But when we started rehearsing in New York, first of all, the band that played when we premiered the Blues Brothers on Saturday Night Live, it was the Saturday Night Live band. But when they put together the Blues Brothers true band with Matt Murphy, who was a true blues player, one of the greats, Steve and Duck, who were part of the architecture of Stax Volt. And none of those guys read music, you know, they didn't read music. Like Alan Rubin, the virtuoso trumpet player from Juilliard School of Music in New York. Tom Malone and I, who went to North Texas together, played in Frank Zappa and Blood, Sweat and Tears and Dr. John, all these different bands together. Paul Schaefer, who was a musical sponge for American music. It was such a diverse band, and the drummer was this young drummer. He was 18, Steve Jordan, he's brilliant. Now he's playing with the Rolling Stones, you know. So, but it was so diverse and so one would think it would not be very compatible, you know. But man, by about the second or third night, we were looking at each other and we were thinking, man, this really sounds good. And I can remember there were a lot of, because Danny and John were so popular from Saturday Night Live, there were celebrities that were coming by the rehearsals and they were going like, whoa, you know. And then when we started playing in Los Angeles, we were getting standing ovations every night. And I remember vividly the way the horns were set up. I was the outside saxophone player, you know, closest to the audience. And I looked and I see Jack Nicholson sitting in the front row. And I looked over at him and he took his sunglasses. He went, wow, puts his sunglasses down, you know. So then it was like a rocket. The next thing, you know, then we made a live record. The record was a hit record. We started playing. And then the next thing you know, we're making a movie. And so it was sort of crazy.
One thing, if you had to choose one record that has been your influence, the one record of your life, not that you play on it, your favorite record, the record that has been the most influential in your life or in your style of playing?
Wow.
Difficult question.
Yeah. Well, I know that there were a couple, actually, that in one way or another. One is Sketches of Spain with Miles Davis. That was my introduction to Miles and to Gil Evans' writing. And in a funny way, which I just realize now, to an affinity for España, because that band, that music is, you know, I never really thought of that before. And so Gil Evans' writing and Miles is playing on that. I used to just listen to it over and over. And then that album that I mentioned about Thelonious Monk, the Monk's music at Town Hall, because I didn't really hear Monk's quartet before I heard that record. And that led me to Monk's quartet. But on that record was a great New York band with like Thad Jones and Phil Woods and Johnny Griffin. So that was also an introduction. And then later, much later, but I think if I had one album that you would say, this is the only album you could have, it would be Elise and Tom, that Elise Regina and Antonio Carlos Jobim, wonderful record that is all Jobim tunes and her singing with fantastic arrangements. But then there's classical music too, because, you know, I love classical music. So that would be a difficult question. Plus there's records, I mean, A Love Supreme from John Coltrane, Duke Ellington. I can think of a bunch of Duke Ellington records, which are, and then, you know, Ella Fitzgerald, Carmen McRae, Sonny Rollins, Charlie Parker. I mean, impossible.
You were telling me as well how wonderful it was to play alongside someone as big as Aretha Franklin, no? The way he played the piano, the way he sings.
Well, with Aretha, in the first movie, when, you know, that was when I first met her, and she was smoking a cigarette, and I found out that she had actually called up Ray Charles because she was a little skeptical about the Blues Brothers band. And Ray assured her that the band was good, you know. And so when it was the day to record with Aretha, everyone was excited, of course. And we were prepared. We had our horn arrangement. And when Aretha started rehearsing with the rhythm section, with the piano, bass, drums, and guitar, she did the arrangement different than our horn chart. So we had to figure out at first what she was doing and reorganize our chart. But we had been in the studio for a couple of weeks already recording other stuff. So we had very good sound in the headphones. Everything was totally prepared. So they did one take and everybody loved it. But the rhythm section said, no, let's do another take. So they did a second take and people loved that. But by that time we had organized our horn chart and we said, no, let's do one more with the horns to add the excitement of the horns in it. And when we finished that take, people were dancing. At the playback, people were dancing in the studio. And so then we were talking about this before, but I actually have a tape somewhere of only Aretha's piano playing on that. And it's wonderful. But I got lucky too, because when Aretha recorded her vocal, because when Aretha did the live take, she didn't sing full out. She didn't sing con todo pobre. So when she did her live take, there was 3 vocal booths side by side. And you know, they're just a little, they're about this big. So the microphone is here, and there's glass, wood from here, glass up to here. So I was here in the corner. So she couldn't see me. She didn't know that I was there with a set of headphones on. And she sang 3 takes of Think. And it was amazing because each take was like tabula rasa. They were totally different from one another. Each take had just nothing in common. She was so free and spontaneous. It was fantastic. And then, luckily enough, after that, I played in the Grammy orchestra when she sang Nessun Dorma, when Pavarotti couldn't sing. I did a famous concert with her at Radio City Music Hall, another big concert at Madison Square Garden, the second movie. So I played with her a bunch of times. I got to play with her a bunch of times after that, and it was always fantastic. She did a big TV special, and with guest stars Elton John, Rod Stewart, Bonnie Raitt, I forget who else. And I played in that orchestra too, so I got to be around her and see she was a force of nature.
And then also big personalities as Ray Charles and James Brown. This is the top of the top, no?
Yeah. So, well, when, ¿cómo se dice the word, la palabra gaudy es un poco over the top, my resume, you know, because basically I didn't get to play with Miles Davis and I didn't get to play with Frank Sinatra. But I got to play with most everybody else. I played with Tony Bennett a lot of times. I was on 2 records of his, played live concerts with him, played in a small group with him, played his 90th birthday special I was on the record with Lady Gaga playing first saxophone. So in that regard, I've been very lucky, you know.
And one thing, how different it was, the second film? Blues Brothers 2000, it was...
Well, it was, for me, it was a totally different experience. In a lot of ways, a lot more satisfying. Because in the first movie, everything was crazy then, you know. It was totally crazy. And we had a wonderful time. And there's things about it, you know. One of the assistant directors told me that when when they first found out that the band was going to be acting in the movie, they were like, they were a little bit not sure about that. But then he told me that once we got on set with them, that was their favorite time, when the band was on set. We were firing back and forth with them, you know. We had relationships with the sound men and with the lighting men, and it was fun. But the second movie, we were in Toronto, and we were blessed with a summer of wonderful weather. And Toronto is a lovely city. I was fortunate to have a good friend up there who was a millionaire guy who had a sailboat, and we used to go sailing on the lake. But the nice thing about the second movie was I went to the studio. I had my car, so anytime that any of the guys in the band were doing something, I would go. And sometimes I would go even if the guys in the band weren't working, if something other special was going on. So I would go and just hang out with the carpenters, or with the sound guys, or with the electricians. And I got to know a lot of the people, especially closer to the makeup people, to the wardrobe people. And that was one thing I realized about in the motion pictures. At least in that production in Toronto, everyone was top flight. They were super professional. They were dedicated. They were interested, and they did their jobs really great. And so you begin to see that the success or failure of a movie depends basically on about 2 or 3 people: the director, or the screenwriter, and the editor, I suppose. Because other than that, everybody is super committed. One of the head stuntman was an amateur saxophone player, and I remember giving him a mouthpiece and giving him a lesson and giving him some books, and we got to go and see some of the big stunts. Yeah, it was the second experience for me was richer in some ways, but both were amazing experiences, you know.
Germán, estabas interesado en la foto, ¿no?
Hay una foto en Made in America.
It's from the album, Made in America.
Sí. En la contra.
The back cover.
Tú estás ahí haciendo algo con las manitas.
You have something, and he's always been interested in knowing what are you doing.
Oh yeah, well, actually, I have my mouthpiece, the boca, and a reed, and a caña. So I'm working a reed on the caña, you know. But they were really playing poker. And I think that Matt Murphy lost a bunch of money, and there was a fracaso entre Steve Cropper and Matt. I'm pretty sure that Matt lost some money. And I'm looking at Alan Rubin, and de verdad, there was cocaína involved in that.
Pues bueno, perdona la tos, pero es lo que nos toca en esta época del año. Simplemente darle las gracias a Jorge Lera, nuestro periodista bilingüe de cabecera, y hacerte entrega de la camiseta de Vinylroute.
Oh, I'm always looking for, this is good.
A lucirla.
Poco pequeño might be for you, man. Oh, no, it'll fit.
Sí, sí. Y lo dicho, esperamos seguir viéndote por España con Jeff Espinoza, con Ramón Arroyo, porque para los que no se hayan visto es una auténtica delicia y un lujo contar con unos musicazos que te hacen un show que te mueres del gusto.
Muchísimas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias a ti, Lu.
Hasta pronto.
Hasta pronto.